Hello and welcome to the session on best practices for staying current in PeopleSoft easily and efficiently. My name is Alex Lightstone and I head up the PeopleSoft Managed Services practice here at version 1. So for today's session, let's start by taking a brief look at the agenda. So first of all, we're going to look at what does staying current actually mean, what is the impact in terms of support timelines, and also the benefits of staying current. We'll then move on to looking at best practices around simplifying the process of staying current and executing that as easily and efficiently as possible. So what does staying current mean? Well, very simply, it means ensuring that you are up to date with the latest patches, security updates, and enhancements from Oracle. In terms of PeopleSoft, Oracle manage the process of delivering new features, bug fixes, and security updates at two distinct levels. So first we have People Tools, and then we have the application. In terms of People Tools, we can generally expect that Oracle will release a new version of People Tools approximately every 12 to 18 months. And each new version will come with new functionality, as well as any bug fixes and indeed security updates that have been previously released. So all People Tools updates are cumulative. There's no firm release schedule from Oracle around People Tools updates. So we can never actually know a firm date for when the next release will be out, but based on previous experiences and going on what's happened in previous years, we can generally expect that will be around every 12 to 18 months, there'll be a new release. Each release is supported obviously as the current release, and the clock will start ticking once the next release of People Tools is delivered from Oracle. At that point, the release that you are using will have 12 months of full support, so that includes bug fixes, platform certifications, and security updates. And then there will be a further 12 months in addition to that of security patches. So taking the example below, People Tools 858, which is obviously the current version, is released. Approximately 12 to 18 months later, we can expect People Tools 859 to be released. And this is where the clock will start ticking on support for People Tools 858. At the point that People Tools 859 is released, we can expect there to be 12 months of full support. So that's bug fixes, security updates, and platform certification. And then we can expect another 12 months of security updates from Oracle. So by the time we reach this point here, where both full support and the security updates have ended, you've had approximately three and a half years of support from Oracle for People Tools, in this instance, 858. Now, things are managed somewhat differently on the application side. On the application side, there is a fixed release schedule. And what happens is Oracle release new images of the application. Each image contains all bug fixes and enhancements and indeed security updates from the previous version or the previous image. So it's a fully cumulative process. So you would only ever need to go with the latest image. The dates for releases of each image are published on the Oracle support website. There are no support end dates as such. So once image 35 is released, that doesn't mean that automatically image 34 is no longer supported. But what it does mean is that if there is a bug for which a fix is in the image 35, you would be expected to download image 35 and then perform selective adoption to install that bug into your current production, or sorry, install the fix for the bug into the current production environment. There can be some dependencies between some of the new application features and People Tools. So some of the new features released may depend on a later People Tools version. Now, having said there are no support end dates, generally speaking, if Oracle deliver a fluid version of a classic page, and looking at the example here below, for those of you who aren't familiar with fluid, the fluid sort of more modern looking page is the one on the right, and the classic is the more traditional PeopleSoft page. Generally, when Oracle release a fluid version of a delivered page, if there was previously a classic version of that page, it will only be supported for 2 years after the release of the fluid version. Does that mean it will stop working after 2 years? No. But what it does mean is that if Oracle deliver any further updates which break the classic page, then they will not support that. So you would then have to fix that yourself or move to the fluid version. Clearly, version 1 would advise moving planning to move to the fluid version of those pages within 2 years of their release. So that's the impact on the support timelines. What are the benefits of staying current? Well, very simply, you ensure that you have the latest security updates and patches installed. Now that's important because there would be nothing worse than having your PeopleSoft environment exploited by a known vulnerability when there was a fix out there that you just hadn't applied. It also allows us to proactively fix bugs. There may be bugs in your PeopleSoft system that you haven't encountered yet. By staying current, you ensure you have all the latest patches, and therefore you're proactively fixing an issue before you might encounter it. Obviously, there's also the element of look and feel. Staying current allows us to make sure that we have the latest look and feel updates, both in terms of the People Tools layer, where maybe Oracle may have tweaked some colors, they may have tweaked some of the page controls, but also in terms of having the latest in fluid pages. A great example of this would be coming next year with the job data fluid page that will eventually replace the classic page. Obviously, with payroll as well, you have the angle on legislative compliance. And an important point to note here is that when Oracle deliver new functionality and that gets implemented into your environment, you do still need to enable it. So you can install it, you can get it installed so it's there and available to use, and then when you're ready to use it, you simply flip the switch and it becomes available to you to the users to use. And here is a great example of the most modern look and feel. This is the latest look and feel coming from the latest images. I think we can all agree that this is a nice, clean, modern look, which will help with keeping the users happy and keeping them feeling they're using a modern application. In terms of timelines for Get Current, well, obviously you do need to stay on a supported People Tools version for security updates. And as I mentioned on an earlier slide, that really means you're looking at doing a People Tools upgrade at least every 2 to 3 years, if not more often. We would strongly advise allowing a minimum of 4 months after a new People Tools release is available before actively trying to deploy it into production. By all means, install it, have a play with it in a sandbox environment, but don't try and use it in production for the first 4 months, as there will undoubtedly be issues that need to be ironed out and only become visible once it's used amongst the wider user base. On a similar note, it's also important to bear in mind that initially, based on what's happened with previous People Tools releases, they are only released via Oracle Cloud Manager. Now, the important part with this is that the platform on which Cloud Manager environments run is Linux and Oracle database. If they are only made available through Cloud Manager, then it is entirely possible that if there are issues that relate to other platforms, such as the Microsoft Windows and or SQL Server platform, those issues may only come to light once the People Tools release is made available generally for on-premises installs on those other platforms. So if you are on a Microsoft platform, it's probably worth bearing that in mind and scheduling that around the People Tools release dates. Application updates, we would generally recommend to try and perform a full Get Current. That means applying all available updates every 18 months to 2 years. Now, as you can see, there's a nice overlap there with the People Tools timeline of every 2 to 3 years. So really what you're actually looking at is, or our advice would be to combine the People Tools and application updates around every 2 years. Doing them together minimizes disruption to the users, and it reduces the testing effort for you, because obviously you only need to test everything in one hit rather than having to test it separately. However, if you feel that you can manage it better as separate updates, then of course that's also perfectly acceptable, and there's no reason not to do that. Another point to bear in mind is the more often you get current, the fewer changes that you will have to adopt in one hit. It becomes a gradual evolution rather than a big bang, more traditional, larger upgrade project. Managing it more regularly that will lead to smaller changes, and you won't have to deal with as many things in one hit. So moving on to best practices for staying current. Well, the first thing is be prepared. I've listed some documentation here that's available on the Oracle support site, which will help you understand, firstly, what's coming up in the next 18 months to 2 years. documentation that's shipped with every new image to inform you of the new features in that image, and the cumulative feature overview tool, which allows you to review the differences in terms of functionality between your current image level and the image level to which you're planning to go to. Version 1 also produced what's called the image insight document, which attempts to combine all of this information into one place. This is produced quarterly, generally speaking, very soon after each image is released, and documents key bugs and new features and metrics and analysis around that. It also includes a more detailed review of the new features in the image, and finally a listing of all bugs that have been fixed in the image based on their priority. In addition to the information supplied by Oracle in terms of formal documentation, there is also, well, primarily two blogs that they run. There's the PeopleSoft technology blog, which is more focused on people tools. The clue's probably in the URL there. And the second part is the PeopleSoft app strategy blog, which is obviously more focused on application functionality. In addition to this, one of my colleagues, Duncan Davies at version 1, also produces the PeopleSoft weekly newsletter, which is both, well, it's informative, but also a light-hearted look at some of the goings-on in the PeopleSoft world. Finally, you should try to be active on the community idea spaces forums. This is an area of my Oracle support. You can find it if you Google community idea spaces on Oracle, then you'll find you'll find a link to it. Now, this is an area where you can suggest new ideas, but also you can vote for existing ideas proposed by other Oracle customers. So you can upvote to say you like something, and you can downvote to say you don't think it's important. Oracle employees will also post their ideas here as well, and again, you can also vote for those. Oracle really do base their decisions on new features to be added based on the feedback received from these community idea spaces. So if you like something, it is really important to upvote it, to give an indication to Oracle that this is something that you would like to see. Of course, there are no guarantees, but certainly if you don't provide the feedback, then Oracle certainly aren't going to know that this is something that you would like to have added. In terms of planning, it's important to engage with the business users so that they understand the new features. They know the business best, so they can work out how those new features could help them and could be used to their best advantage. So it's important to meet with them regularly to make sure they're aware of upcoming changes. It's important to get their buy-in, otherwise all those new fancy features are going to go unused. And finally, whenever Oracle deliver a new Fluid page, if that's a classic page, if you're using the classic page, then as previously mentioned, you've got 2 years to stop using the classic page and transition to the Fluid page. And that's a very important. You really need to plan to be off those classic pages once the Fluid pages come out. So in terms of managing that dirty C word of customizations, customizations can be a big hindrance to the process of staying current, but Oracle have in recent years released various tools that can help to manage that better. So the first one, which I guess most people are familiar with, is event mapping. Now, this effectively allows you to separate your custom people code from the Oracle delivered people code on Oracle delivered pages and records. Very useful tool, and it helps in terms of when applying the update, it reduces the amount of effort that is required to reapply any customizations that could be overwritten, because they will no longer be overwritten because they're now maintained separately from the delivered code. In a similar vein, drop zones allow you to customize or allow you to add custom fields to delivered pages without customizing the page itself. So again, if Oracle redeliver a new version of the delivered page, that's fine. Your customizations will still persist. And finally, Oracle have the page field configurator tool, which allows you to make small changes, such as maybe changing a field label or changing the visibility of a field, or possibly making it read only through the front end of the application. So this is a completely non-technical way of making minor changes to pages, which will also be preserved during a get current process. Now, it's important to note, these tools assist with managing customizations. They don't remove the need to actually retest your customizations, because Oracle obviously could have redelivered they could have delivered changes to a page that means that your customization no longer works. So it is still important to retest the customizations, but this certainly removes the effort in actually reapplying those customizations. In line with that, avoid modifying delivered people code wherever possible. It should be possible to use event mapping. If you don't want to use event mapping, or you can't use event mapping for some reason, then always try and add your code in places where Oracle haven't added code thus far. If Oracle haven't added code thus far, it's less likely that they're going to deliver changes to that in the future. And always avoid modifying delivered records. Always create new custom child records off the parent delivered record, as that would assist greatly with the process of applying changes. Oracle have also provided the customization repository. This is a place where you can upload details on your customizations via Change Assistant, and you can then ask PeopleSoft to analyze the impact of those customizations relative to the change package that you'll be using as part of your get current process. This will then allow you to easily and quickly identify customizations which may be overwritten during the get current patching, and it can be done very early in the process, because traditionally you would have had to have run a compare report, which happens much later once you've really done the initial install, whereas this can be done basically as soon as the change package is created, which is one of the first tasks you will do. You can then analyze the impact of that on your customizations. So in terms of execution, as previously discussed, if you need to rework an existing customization, rework it using one of the aforementioned tools. Where possible, look to automate the patching tasks. This is particularly true for security updates that you really should be applying every quarter. So it's a repeatable task where automation is absolutely key, because effectively you'll be doing the same steps each time. So it should be fully possible to automate that. In line with automating the execution, you can also automate the testing of any security patches, or indeed PeopleTools upgrades, or indeed application upgrades, using the PeopleTools test framework. This is an automated testing tool that is actually included with your PeopleSoft license, so you already own it. It was originally developed by Oracle for their own internal testing, but they've since decided to release that out to the wider user base. Now, this can be used, the best use for this is really for repeatable regression testing patterns. So as previously mentioned, typically that's going to be sort of things like security updates, PeopleTools upgrades, repeatable, frequent tasks. There is an initial one-time effort on this, of course, that is to build the test scripts so that the test framework knows what it needs to test, knows the steps it needs to follow. But obviously, once that's in place, you then have test scripts that can be reused. And the next time you come to testing, it's just a question of pushing the button, letting the PeopleTools test framework go off and do its thing, and then come back and reviewing the outputs. When building the test scripts, we would also suggest that you focus primarily on your high volume business critical transactions. These are things like ensuring you can hire a new employee, ensuring you can enter important data for payroll, for example. On the flip side of that, if you can't add an employee's phone number, it's not great, but equally, it's not the end of the world. So whilst that does need to be tested, it's less critical, and it can possibly be something that you manage post install if it becomes an issue, versus something like, as I say, entering a new hire, entering some payroll data, where that is a truly critical transaction that's very time sensitive, and if it doesn't work, it's going to give you a serious problem. PeopleTools test framework is really limited to transactional testing, so the process of entering data on a page and saving and checking all the validation runs, and that the save completes without an error. It's not really usable in terms of reports or checking payroll results and so on. It's really about checking the process of entering data and making sure that that saves correctly without any unexpected errors. So finally, in summary, the main points I would take away from this presentation would be: stay informed on the upcoming changes, design your customizations to avoid minimizing the impact on delivered objects, and take the opportunity, if you have to reapply or rework your customizations during patching, to use those new tools. Don't just reapply them, because otherwise you're going to have to do the same thing the next time you come to do a get current process. Look to automate the patching process, and look to automate the testing wherever possible and appropriate. particularly with security patching. This is it's a quarterly task. It's something you need to be doing on a quarterly basis. So we need to make that repeatable and as automated as possible. If you have any questions or you'd like to discuss any of the topics discussed in this presentation, please, by all means, do look for me on the version 1 team section on the event page. I would be happy to discuss any of these topics with you further. Thank you for your time today, and I hope to talk to you soon. Bye-bye.